The night his chains melted, I knew we had seen something not meant for this earth. It was in the dry season, when the land cracked and begged for rain, and the fields gave barely enough to fill a basket. We were tired, sick, and hungry. The master worked us harder than usual, snapping his whip if he thought we were slow. But he didn't touch Kofi. Nobody touched Kofi. Kofi was strange. He was a slave like us, but he didn't complain. When the master cursed us, Kofi would whisper, "Bless them that curse you," Luke 6 verse 28. When there wasn't enough food, Kofi gave his share away, saying, "It is more blessed to give than to receive," Acts 20 verse 35. One night, Kofi asked us to gather. He wanted to pray. I didn't care for praying. I thought, what use is praying when you're in chains? But his voice was soft, and his eyes had something I couldn't explain. So we sat in the dark and listened. He prayed for rain, for our freedom, even for the master. He said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," Luke 23 verse 34. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought, he's mad. The next morning, the rain came. It wasn't just rain, it was a flood. The sky opened up, and the water poured for hours. The cracked earth drank it all, and we stood in the mud, soaked but laughing. The master cursed, shouting that the fields would be ruined. We didn't care. For once, the rain felt like hope. That night, Kofi sat by the fire and hummed a hymn. His voice was low and warm, like the earth itself was singing. I watched him, trying to understand him. He smiled at me, and I wanted to ask why he prayed for the master, why he gave when he had nothing. But before I could speak, the air changed. It wasn't wind, but something heavy, like the weight of 1,000 eyes watching. Kofi's smile didn't fade. He looked up and said, "Be still, and know that I am God," Psalm 46 verse 10. Then it happened. The chains around his wrists and ankles began to glow. A soft, golden light spread over the iron, and the links melted like wax. We all froze. No fire touched them, no heat. Just light. The chains dripped away, leaving nothing but his bare skin. Kofi stood and stretched, his arms reaching toward the sky. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But Kofi looked at us, and his eyes weren't angry or sad. They were kind, too kind. He said, "If the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed," John 8 verse 36. And then he walked away. We called after him, begged him to take us with him, but he shook his head. He said, "Not yet. You will know when the time comes." He disappeared into the forest, and the darkness swallowed him whole. The master never found him. The dogs couldn't track him. It was as if Kofi had vanished into thin air. But the next day, the rains brought life to the fields, and the master's cruelty softened, as though the fear of what he couldn't explain haunted him. Years later, when I found my freedom, I thought of Kofi. I wondered if he had been an angel, a spirit, or just a man with a faith so strong it broke iron. But I'll never forget the night his chains melted, and the world changed. Years passed, but Kofi's story never left me. After gaining my freedom, I traveled to the towns and villages, telling people what I'd seen. Some called it a miracle, others called it madness. But I told them the truth about the rain, the light, and how Kofi walked away with nothing but his faith and a smile. One day, in a bustling market far from where we had walked the fields, I heard whispers about a man who gave away gold like it was water. They said he would appear out of nowhere, help the poor, and then vanish. Some said he was a trader, others claimed he was a thief. I didn't believe any of it until I saw him with my own eyes. It was Kofi. He was dressed in plain robes, yet the way people flocked to him, you'd think he was a king. Children clung to his legs, and widows wept at his feet. He handed out coins, food, and cloth as though his supply would never run out. "Kofi," I called, pushing through the crowd. He looked up, and for a moment, his eyes glistened with recognition. Then he smiled, the same kind smile I remembered. "Brother," he said, embracing me warmly. "Where have you been? How do you have all this?" I asked, gesturing to the pile of goods at his feet. He chuckled softly. "It is not mine," he said. "The Lord provides." He told me how he'd wandered after leaving us, helping those in need, trusting that God would care for him. One night, while resting under a tree, he found a shimmering box buried in the earth. Inside was enough gold to last 10 lifetimes. I asked the Lord why he would give such a thing to someone like me, Kofi said. And I heard in my heart, with the measure you use, it will be measured to you, and even more, Mark 4 verse 24. He believed the gold was given to him because of his kindness. He had never hoarded it, never used it for himself. Instead, he traveled, giving freely to those in need. **** The generous soul will be made rich, and he who waters will also be watered himself. **** Proverbs 11 verse 25, he told me, smiling as he handed a young boy a sack of grain. It's a simple truth. Give, and you will never lack. I stayed with Kofi for a while, traveling with him and watching how he lived. He never kept more than he could carry, and every time he emptied his hands, something new would come to replace it: gold, food, or shelter. It was as if heaven itself refused to let him go without. One evening, as we sat by a fire, he turned to me and said, "This wealth is not mine, brother. It belongs to those who need it. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy." Matthew 6 verse 19. He looked at the stars and added, "I am just a vessel. If I ever forget that, it will all disappear." Kofi's kindness became legend. Even after he passed into the unseen world, his story lived on, inspiring others to give, to love, and to trust. And as for me, I often think of those melted chains and the man who taught me that the greatest wealth is not gold, but a heart willing to give.
If you were inspired by this story, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and please make sure you click on the notification button to know whenever we post a new content. God bless you.